Well, folks, this is going to be the second half of my Snakehead Seminar out at Island Tackle Outfitters. And again, I highly recommend that place. Excellent gear, great staff. So I won't give any more intros because if you're watching this, I assumed you watched the first half. So let's just get straight to it. And once the April switch, once that changeover happens, I'm hunting for pads. I'm hunting for any kind of thick vegetation I can find. Now here's a brief diagram. There's probably one or two people in here who could actually identify where this is from this photo, but I won't give it to you just that easy. But what you're looking at here is a river system, flows down. That's the direction of the current right here. This is a small island surrounded by shallow water. You can see with the shoreline here, those are your trees and your timber. All of this is pad fields. Now there's a few different ways you can pick this apart. And every time I go snakehead fishing, it's almost like a new day, a completely new day, completely new area. You have to identify what the snakehead are doing on that day. And that's just kind of the name of the game with snakehead. So one way you can tackle it is to literally take, I'm a kayak fisherman. That's how I chase these fish, and I love it. What I'll do is I'll go and sit in these pad fields and I'll fan cast all around me. Because a lot of times you can do that and catch 4, 5, 6 fish at least just fan casting with like a topwater frog or something similar in these pad fields. Other hot spots I have luck, like if I find an island with water around it, I'm gonna fish all around that. Because what you're looking at here, what the CP means is, like for me, is choke point. A choke point is a funnel. Now, kind of military jargon here. But in terms of when you're fishing, any fish that wants to traverse this, any bait fish that wants to go from point A to point B has to go through this narrow zone right here. And predatory fish will stake out these narrow zones and blast anything that comes through it. That's another really good place to look for them. And this photo is actually taken right on this shoreline. So you can see actually what I'm fishing right here, what it actually looks like. You can see where that new kind of spring foliage is coming out. Actually, this is a fall photo. That's why it has some of this coloration into it. I'll catch them in the pad fields. I'll catch them on the transition between the pads and the timber. Like I said, like every time you go out, there are a few different kind of key areas you can look for, but you have to determine the pattern pretty much every time you go out. Like right now, depending on which area you go in the state, some places snakehead are spawning, some places they aren't. When snakehead are spawning, I haven't cracked the code yet. Maybe somebody else has, but when they're spawning, like really engaged in spawning, let me know how to catch them. because I have not had much luck when they're actually truly on the spawn. Questions on this slide?
I don't have a question about the slide exactly, but what would you say is the average depth of the water where because I've heard a lot of guys that catch them over the Potomac Matterwoman area, they say like 2.5, 3 feet.
It's a good question.
Water.
And again, it varies. I've caught them as shallow as probably 6 inches, 5, 6 inches. And I mean, I've seen them going around that shallow water. Sometimes you'll see their dorsal fin just kind of come out of the water. So it's going to depend on the day and the time of year, honestly. I know guys who actually target them deep because snakehead, based on the science thus far, do go through an ontogenetic shift. And that's where the behavior will change between different sizes of fish. So they hit a certain point and start transitioning to a different kind of behavior. Like, I think it has to do with their metabolism. The larger fish will start to prefer slightly cooler water. The smaller fish will prefer slightly warmer water. So there's a lot of variables to play with, but to answer your question as directly as I can, I've caught them as shallow as 5 or 6 inches, and I've caught them as deep as probably about 6 feet, but I know guys have caught them a lot deeper than that. I'm just not much of a deep water snakehead fisherman. I live for the topwater bite once it's around.
Yeah.
We were catching them in the Marshy Hope in January, blue cat fishing in 25 to 30 feet of water on cut bait, anywhere from 5 to 12 pounds.
It's killer.
How deep was it, you said?
We were fishing 25, 30 feet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Was it a
Big blue cats what we were targeting, but they were laying down there with the big blue cats on the bottom, you know what I mean?
I think I saw the picture of the one that the cornflower had. Oof, that was a tank.
Yeah.
That was a tank.
It's ridiculous. Couldn't believe it.
So I covered a little bit of this before, but in terms of how to catch them, like I said before, other parts of the month, and you just heard Kaz catch them on cut bait. I haven't done that yet, but I've seen the pictures. That's a fact. The biggest minnows you can get your hand on is probably what I'm going to aim for. And again, about 6 to 18 inches underneath the float. In the early part of the season, that's pretty much the go-to. You get towards the middle end of March, what I like to do, and I think this is within the law. You can tag me on this one, Jim. But I like to put out 1 or 2 float rods, and then I'll have an inline spinner that I can cast while I'm waiting for a float to drop. Around April timeframe, and then all the way through November, chatterbaits, topwater frogs, buzz baits, swim baits. I would say inline spinners, but at this time of year where you're chasing snakes, a lot of times the grass has grown up by then. And I don't like throwing any kind of bear treble hook in all that grass. It's a waste of time. It just gets fouled up. But my personal favorite lures, I call my personal best the Snakehead on a Z-Man Pro chatterbait crawfish color with a twin curly tail pearl color. And that's a, I don't know if I should have given you all that intel, but chatterbaits will get the job done a lot because you're fishing for snakehead, generally speaking, in water that's either tannic or off color. So you need something that's going to throw off some flash or some vibration if you really want to get their attention a lot of times. And chatterbait definitely fits the bill in that regard. Booyah Poppin' Pad Crasher, it's a great lure, but I mean, if you fish any kind, I don't know if that's too broad, but pretty much any kind of topwater frog or something similar, once it's later in the year, a little bit warmer, you can get on them. And I guess the last note I'll make on that is, if you can find a day that's warm with cloud cover and little wind, that's perfect conditions in my book. Because the cloud cover will make the fish feel a little bit safer. They'll come up to the top more. They're not afraid of getting preyed on by ospreys or eagles. Not as afraid anyway. And you'll get a lot more topwater action on those cloudy days than you will on sunny, in my experience. In terms of tackle, I mean, your general bass fishing gear will get the job done, but make sure that whatever rod you're throwing has a stiff backbone. Like this is not finesse fishing. The mouth of a snakehead is not the mouth of a largemouth. When you go to set the hook on a snakehead, put everything you have into it. And because of that, I usually don't run with anything less than about 20-pound braid. I could probably get away with a little bit lighter, but I don't like to because I like to throw up in deep cover a lot of times, especially early in the spring. So that when you set that hook, you're not worrying about the knot you tied, you're not worrying about your line. All you're worrying about is applying as much energy as you can to that hook set. So on that note, like, check your topwater frogs and topwater hollow bodies like this. Look at the angle of the hook when it comes out of the package. Some brands are okay and they're slightly angled upward. That's what you want. Some brands straight out of the pack are more either on a straight plane or pointed slightly down. You don't want that. What you want is penetration in the upper part of the roof of the mouth of the snakehead. So when you take it out of the pack, if it's not bent slightly up, take a pair of pliers and bend it slightly up. It's going to reduce your weedless effect a little bit, but generally speaking, those hollow bodies are still good to go. I guess the last note here, I use Suffix braid, 20 pound, never failed me. Never failed me at all. Any questions?
What are your opinions on using trailer hooks for chatterbaits, buzzbaits, and spinnerbaits?
I especially like them on buzzbaits because there are certain, I'm going to call it moods because I don't know what else to call it with snakehead, but there are certain moods they get in where they will short strike. And it's not like one snake is short striking. Every snake you're dealing with that day is short striking. So with a buzzbait, I will definitely throw a trailer hook. Spinnerbait, and I guess the whole other gamut of lures out there. Depends on what kind of cover I'm fishing. Because if I'm in a pad field, for instance, I'm probably not going to use one just because I'm going to spend too much time ripping it through the pads trying to get it unsnagged. But if I can get away with the trailer hook, I will. Yeah.
What's your retrieve like with the frogs? I was out a couple of weeks ago, really heavy pads, but there's stuff moving around, and a carp were also spawning at that time, so I didn't know exactly what it was, but I didn't know if I was leaving the frog to sit too long or too little.
I was talking to a friend today. He just got a 12-pounder on one of the rivers out on the eastern shore, but before he got that 12-pounder, he spent most of the day watching fish rummage and splash around in the pad fields. There's a certain time of year that you arrive at on these eastern shore waters that I've fished, where the carp and to some degree the shad, especially the mud shad, and the snakehead will all be in these pad fields at the same time. And you're going to see a lot of moving around and thrashing, and you don't really know what it is unless they come out of the water, or unless it's a huge splash. If it's a huge splash, you're like, okay, it's probably a carp. If you hear a popping sound, you know you're probably dealing with snakehead. But either way, it's kind of nesting behavior. But to get back to answer your question about the retrieve, there are some days you'll go for snakehead, and you can take a whopper plopper and throw a steady retrieve and tear them up. But in my experience, those days are usually few and far between. The best luck I have, especially on days where the bite is not on fire with moving baits, is to slow it way down. And when you think you've slowed it down, slow it down again. And when you think you've slowed it really down, slow it down again. If I have a snakehead following me on a hollow body lure, I'll stop it. And I'll let it sit for 5, 10, 15 seconds. And a lot of times they'll grab it then, but if I just give it the slightest twitch after that really long pause, they just crush it. Just crush it. I might have that in one of these videos, actually. Any other questions?